This is CBN NewsWatch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for CBN NewsWatch for this Friday, June 19th. I'm George Thomas. We begin overseas as the deadline approaches to bring parts of biblical Judea and Samaria under Israeli sovereignty. Israelis are struggling amongst themselves over what has been dubbed the annexation plan. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has set July 1st as his goal to complete the plan, originally part of President Trump's deal of the century. Here's the details. It aims to extend Israeli law over Jewish communities in the West Bank, where Palestinians want to establish a future state. But many in Israel oppose the plan for very different reasons. CBN News Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl joins us now with more on what is at stake. Julie, great to see you. So tell me, what are we referring to when we talk about annexation? And secondly, does it have support here in the United States?
Okay, well, George, first of all, everyone's talking about annexation, including us, but it's really a little bit of a different term there. It's really sovereignty. Israel's extending its sovereignty over land that's already in its hands. There are Jewish communities in these places, settlements that already are built, they're established, they've been there for decades, and Israel is basically extending its law, its Israeli law, over those communities. Nothing's going to change so much on the ground in terms of the roads, in terms of problems for the Palestinians. It's not going to be that way. It's basically kind of just a legal designation. Now, in terms of the United States, AIPAC, just about a week ago, said for the very, very first time, instructed congressmen that they could verbally and vocally oppose Israel. Now, AIPAC, is the biggest Israel lobby in the United States, and they said you could publicly oppose Israel as long as you don't threaten to take away aid. Evangelicals also are split almost half and half. Some support it, some don't.
Go back to what's happening there on the ground. As I mentioned, not all Israelis are in favor of this, right?
That is true, George. So some of the Israelis oppose it because they see this as a blockage to a Palestinian state. That's probably pretty well, known. But the other people that are opposing it, many of the settlers themselves are opposing it because they believe that it's actually dividing God's land. In fact, this week there's a group that came out called Preserving the Eternal, and they said that there are about 365 major sites that are important to Israel's heritage, which also means they're probably important to Christian heritage, biblical sites that will be left under Palestinian hands, including like Shiloh, where the Ark of the Covenant first rested, and an ancient synagogue, and many other places.
Real quickly, just the last few seconds, tell us quickly, how is Israel dealing with COVID-19?
Well, we've had an upsurge a little bit in the number of cases. But Israel has said, the Prime Minister said he won't pull back on the restrictions, but he won't release anything else in the economy. Israel is struggling to get back on its feet because they had quite an extensive lockdown. But Israelis are still required to wear masks and practice social distancing, but that's where we're at right now.
Okay, terrific. Thank you so much, Julie. You can catch the latest of Jerusalem Dateline with Chris Mitchell and Julie at tonight at 9:30 Eastern, right here on the CBN News Channel. A long-awaited win at the United States Supreme Court Thursday for Dreamers, the immigrants whose parents brought them to the U.S. as children. The justices ruled against the Trump administration and its effort to end the program that protects Dreamers from deportation. In a 5-4 decision, the justices cited procedural errors by the administration. The program, known as DACA, continues and allows the kids to work and go to school here in the U.S. One dreamer reacted to the decision, saying he's lived in America since he was 5, and he's now 20, and he says that he is an American. 155 years ago today, slaves along the Gulf Coast of Texas finally learned they were free. It's a day that's come to be called Juneteenth. And as America confronts race relations, it's becoming a much more important holiday to recognize. But many Americans don't know much about it. Jennifer Wishan offers a history lesson.
Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation that freed slaves in January of 1863. 2.5 years later, on June 19, 1865, the news finally reached Galveston, Texas. A Union general read the order aloud. All slaves are free.
Essentially, slavery ended on that day.
Newly freed people celebrated at their church.
It's really been a story that Galveston has been able to try to get out for years.
The day became known as Juneteenth.
Juneteenth is actually the day that African Americans can celebrate their independence. So, with all of the conversation around racial equality and justice in the United States, a lot of people are turning to Juneteenth as a symbol, as a way they can celebrate and honor the sacrifices that African Americans have made.
What do we want? Justice! What do we want it? Now!
The police killing of George Floyd and the protests that followed have raised the holiday's profile. Now a number of businesses are declaring it a holiday, including Nike, Twitter, and Target. Some states are doing the same.
I'm going to sign an executive order today, hence all my pens, recognizing Juneteenth as a holiday for state employees.
Inside the U.S. Capitol, Speaker Nancy Pelosi ordered the removal of portraits of former speakers who were members of the Confederacy. Today, 46 states recognize Juneteenth as a holiday or day of recognition.
So this is why more and more people are talking about it, because frankly, a lot of people didn't know it exists.
Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
Thank you, Jennifer. The Southern Baptist Convention has elected a black pastor to lead the largest Protestant denomination. It is a historic move, as this is the first time in the SBC 103-year history that it has elected an African-American pastor as its chairman. Reverend Roland Slade, senior pastor of Meridian Baptist Church in El Cajon, California, was elected to lead the Baptists. Slade says he's grateful for the unanimous decision. About earning the vote, he says, quote, "It says that if you do the work, not only will God reward you, but you will have the support of all the folks you are working with." Slade's nomination was announced during an online panel discussion on race. He and several other pastors on the panel called for racial unity and healing within the church. Coming up, while churches in some states gather to worship, others are still under strict orders not to. That story in a moment.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep as the world watches from the outside.
It's a big diplomatic tug of war here in the Middle East.
Go inside the story with Jerusalem Dateline.
Israeli archaeologists are talking about a discovery that could change the thinking about the Temple Mount.
Join CBN Jerusalem Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell and get the biblical perspective on the events shaping the world.
It's what starts in Israel then ends up going to other places.
Watch Jerusalem Dateline Friday night at 9:30 on the CBN News Channel.
Life. It's meant to be lived fully. Jesus said it. I came to give you life. Life to the fullest. Life in your family. Life in your finances. Life in your body, mind, and spirit. Life in your everyday. At CBN.com, we're taking what Jesus said seriously. We're here to help you discover life. Life. Live it fully. CBN.com.
Welcome back to the broadcast. As you know, churches across the United States are opening. Others are proceeding with caution, and others are being prevented from opening altogether. Our Mark Martin spoke with conservative talk radio host Todd Starnes about the battles some churches are still facing for their right to worship together.
Todd, bring us up to speed where things stand across the nation with church reopenings.
Well, it's good news. We're starting to see church houses across the country that are reopening, and some are being very creative about it. For example, Bellevue Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee, they actually have multiple worship services. They block off every other row so you can practice social distancing, and they even have an exclusive service. You know how a lot of churches, they have the praise band service, and then they have the choir service. Well, at Bellevue Baptist Church, they have the mask service. So it's a service. Everybody in that building has to wear a face mask. So when they go to church. So churches by and large are getting very creative. They're doing a terrific job of reopening the churches and getting people back in those pews.
You've been reporting on cases in places like Chicago, with the city still cracking down on churches. Elaborate on that.
Well, we're starting to see some of those crackdowns loosen up just a little bit. There were two major lawsuits, and unfortunately, there was this one in Chicago with two churches that were fined. They were the pastors were literally fined for holding worship services. And then in California, you had a crackdown there where people were not allowed to congregate in groups larger than, I believe, 10 or 25 people. And sadly for the churches and sadly for religious liberty, the courts rejected those cases. More disturbing in the California case, you had Chief Justice John Roberts siding with the liberal justices in cracking down and affirming the church crackdown in California. So while churches are beginning to reopen and get back to the business at hand, long term, we're going to have a very, very difficult discussion on where religious liberty stands here in the United States of America.
You talked with a constitutional law expert recently about the recent Supreme Court ruling to keep a California church closed and the implications of that ruling. You touched on that. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, well, this case, the South Bay Pentecostal Church, and they wanted the right to hold worship services. I mean, again, people are congregating on the beach. In recent days, we've seen tens of thousands of people marching in the streets. And so a lot of Christians are saying, well, wait a second, if they can do all that, why can't we go into the church house and pray and worship and experience corporate worship? So this lawsuit went to the Supreme Court, all the way to the Supreme Court. Chief Justice John Roberts sided with the justices, the liberal justices, and said, hey, look, it was a reasonable thing for the governor to do. Other groups, for example, were allowed were also banned. And so the Chief Justice, in a shocking decision, voted against the churches.
With all this going on, could constitutional rights like freedom of religion be at risk in America?
Well, I have no doubt this is one of the more concerning things of this coronavirus, this global pandemic, is that religious liberty was one of the first things to be set aside. And they did so in the name of public safety. What I find very interesting is when you compare how the mainstream media reacted to these churches. I mean, they were publicly shaming the churches and the pastors, saying that anybody who went to the church was going to get coronavirus. And yet these same media outlets are now celebrating the tens of thousands of people who are engaged in these nationwide protests and who, in fact, are not engaging in social distancing and other things. Look, I think there's a lesson here for all of us. You know, by and large, I think most churches in America understood that, you know what, in the early days, we didn't know what this thing was. Why not be prudent? And there were some churches out there that said, you know what, we're not going to be prudent. The government's not going to tell us what to do. And there were big problems in those churches because a lot of people got sick. So I think we need to understand that, yes, we need to stand up for religious liberty, but we also need to understand that there's a good, healthy dose of common sense here as we determine when it's appropriate to get back to the church house.
All right, Todd Starnes, thank you for your insights and time, sir.
Thank you.
Still ahead, how one state's flag and its Confederate symbol may hurt college football there.
Life is better with a good night's sleep. Get your free DVD or booklet of Protect Your Sleep today.
I'm Ephraim Graham, and this is Studio 5. Cruise with me as I discover the good things happening in the world of music, sports, television, and movies.
The fact that Ryan Coogler was going to be directing the film, I knew that something special was going to happen.
We'll chat with artists at the forefront of entertainment and explore the connection between popular culture and faith.
I asked my pastor, I said, well, does that mean I'm supposed to be a preacher? He says, well, no, you already have a pulpit.
Watch Studio 5 Wednesday night at 9:30.
Remember for a moment what it was like to be a child. You believed every story you were told. You saw a world full of endless possibilities. What stories will the world's orphaned and at-risk children believe? We believe the Bible tells the only story truly worth believing. We believe that every child should have the opportunity to dream, the chance to take challenges and turn them into possibilities, the chance to stand on the promises of God, to recognize their place in the greatest story ever told. They have their whole lives ahead of them. Theirs is a world of endless possibilities. They are looking for a story to believe. We will tell them that story. Will you join us?
Welcome back to the broadcast. The Mississippi state flag could cost the state any Southeastern Conference championship games in the future. SEC Commissioner Greg Sankey told state leaders they need to change the flag, which has the Confederate symbol on part of it. CBN Sports reporter Sean Brown is here with more. So, Sean, was this a surprise coming from the SEC?
No, considering what's happening right now in our nation. What's more surprising is that it's taken this long. In 2001, I know that I believe that residents actually voted in a referendum to actually keep the flag the way that it is. I'm just surprised that that vote went through, and then now, in the wake of what's happening with police brutality and protests against systemic racism, I'm not surprised because of that. But it's long overdue.
How is it resonating this Juneteenth with fans and players?
Well, I mean, I don't think any student athlete or students want to be reminded that there were once slaves in a particular state, that, people once treated your ancestors worse than their pets. I don't think we need a reminder. African Americans in this country already know. It's just it actually moves the needle in terms of racial equality. And so I'd imagine that as a student at one of these institutions in the state, it's somewhat comforting to know that the schools and the state is moving in this direction.
Yeah. How could what's happening, Sean, in our nation now impact college sports, especially as we look ahead to the big NCAA college football season?
Well, again, I think it just moves the needle in terms of letting students know, particularly African-American students, that, hey, we see you, we recognize that your lives matter. And this, that flag doesn't represent the core values that the institutions represent. And so we want you to know that we see you, we hear you, and we're concerned about your well-being at our institutions.
Yeah, it's really dramatic, Sean, that just how the sad passing of Mr. Floyd has touched pretty much all segments of our society, and in fact around the world, as it deals with race relations between various communities around the world, right?
I agree, man. Now's the time It's unfortunate, some of the lives that have been lost because of police brutality and systemic racism. But now I believe the Lord's actually using this to say, hey, 2020 vision, but I'm gonna show you some things that are happening right now, and it's time to move forward in love and in peace and justice for everyone.
That's fantastic, Sean, my man. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Have a great weekend. Stay safe. Sean Brown, as always, thanks for your time. By the way, coming up just in time for Father's Day, a closer look at what the important role dads play in the lives of their children and families, with a few celebrity dads talking about why it's their most important role ever. That story in a moment. Stay with us.
Before you marry is a bad idea. Don't tell me there's no such thing as gun violence.
That just depends on your definition of when life begins.
Watch Dan and Dale tackle trending topics that test your faith on the next Faith Wire, Monday night at 9:30. The Global Lane takes you around the world, providing facts over fiction.
What might rising trade and geopolitical tensions mean for you on the home front?
With over 45 years of experience, award-winning journalist Gary Lane brings you the truth from a global angle.
What about the issue of immigration?
World news analysis you won't see anywhere else.
And it's all right here on the Global Lane.
Watch The Global Lane, Thursday night at 9:30.
Welcome back. A new documentary on dads out this Father's Day, shining a light on 6 fathers from around the world, with a few celebrity dads like Will Smith and Jimmy Fallon making an appearance. Dad marks the directorial debut for actress Bryce Dallas Howard. Ephraim Graham caught up with her and her famous father.
If I take you back, I'll have to cut your pay $5 a week.
The Help.
And what kind of a man shows up to a date in board shorts?
Jurassic World.
Can't cook and clean and wash.
Rocket Man. Just a few of Bryce Dallas Howard's many acting credits.
Dads, apparently you're one.
I am one.
I want to know more about what it takes to be a father.
Her latest role is director of this feature film.
We had a 1,000-page manual for a television, and they sent you home with a baby and nothing.
An emotion-packed documentary on dads.
When you're expecting a child, you're never prepared for the what-ifs. He had 2 holes in his heart. I'm forever gonna be his protector.
I love you all of my big heart.
Oh, you do? The running joke in the family is that I'm always an afterthought, and I think many dads feel that way. So what triggered or inspired you to focus on dads?
I think that was probably what you just articulated was one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this movie. Because I certainly rely upon my husband as much as he relies upon me. My dad was and is an incredibly involved.
Like father, like daughter. Bryce's dad is filmmaker Ron Howard. You're a great American storyteller. I think a lot of us see that in you. And of course, we were introduced to you as a kid
as
Opie Taylor.
The Andy Griffith Show.
starring Andy Griffith with Ronnie Howard.
Now, Opie, I'm your pa, and I'm telling you to hush up.
Well, you told me I could speak now or forever hold my peace.
We talk about child stars transitioning. You're often hailed as one of the greatest success stories. What is it about your life that you think that made this work? We see so many horrible stories.
Well, you know, I'm very fortunate in terms of my family. Very strong family. My dad was kind of a genius of a father.
That genius?
Iris, you look big.
Pregnant.
Actor Rance Howard, who died in 2017.
Dad, I remember you were worried that you'd never be as good a dad as your own father.
He was great. That's been absolutely my worry. If you can be a good dad, that is a blessing that you can pass on. Is this normal? No.
One of the beauties of it I got to see, of course, was you, your dad, and your grandfather. What was that like for you to work on the project? And I know he's not here to see it, your grandfather, but for that to come together.
You know, that was really amazing because my grandfather, I've always, and I think I can speak for my siblings in this, we've always felt really proud just of how much our grandparents valued parenting and how much our family benefited from that, from their active parenting. And in terms of my own dad, it's his relationship with his father. You know, they were absolutely best friends. And that's how I feel with my dad. And that's how my siblings feel with my dad.
Being the father, it's a very fluid thing.
It's love at first sight, like for real, for real.
I'm not Jimmy Fallon anymore. I'm Winnie's dad.
Now, this dude lives here forever.
What's it like now seeing your daughter following the same career path?
Well, it's really thrilling and gratifying on a couple levels. First of all, it's such a tough business, especially for women. I realized how much harder it is for women when I saw, you know, sort of the other elements, factors that she has to cope with. And I'm not talking about, you know, anything, you know, abusive but just the pressure on actresses especially is just more intense. The scrutiny is more intense. But I'm very gratified because she's in it for the right reason.
Having a kid is the meaning of life. This is my purpose now.
You are the center of that child's world. Your dad.
Looks like a great documentary. By the way, Dads is available just in time for Father's Day, which is Sunday. It's streaming on Apple TV+. Wish everyone, all out there, fathers, to have a fantastic Father's Day. Well, folks, that is it for this edition of CBN News Watch. Remember, you can find more of our news programs on the CBN News Channel anytime or online with cbnnews.com. Also, tell us what you think about the stories you have seen here. Email us. Remember that? Yeah, email. So email newswatch@cbn.com, or you can write a letter to us, or you can reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. From all of us here at the headquarters of the Christian Broadcasting Network, we wish you a fantastic weekend ahead. Goodbye, and God bless. See you guys.